This is a very unique memoir in that we don't actually know who wrote it. Written by the anonymous voice behind a hit Twitter account, it tells the story of a woman who longed for connection and comfort in the midst of a horrible divorce. On a whim, she created a Twitter account styling herself as a medieval duchess. And I think if we go to the next slide, you get a better view of the portrait. And began sharing gently humorous anecdotes about her fictional life and words of wisdom and encouragement to anyone who might need them. Before long, the Duchess had become a full-blown phenomenon with over 48,000 followers, including the likes of Lyle Lovett and writers like Elizabeth McCracken. You don't have to be an existing fan of the elusive Duchess Goldblatt or even have a Twitter account, which I don't, to fall in love with this memoir, which I did. It's an uplifting story of finding community in a very unlikely place and the incredible value of small acts of kindness. This book is by turns hilarious and heartbreaking. It's an ideal fit for anyone who enjoys humorists with a heart like David and Amy Sedaris or Jenny Slate.
Our next book. In the fall of 1918, 13-year-old German immigrant Pia longs to be far from Philadelphia's overcrowded slums and the anti-immigrant sentiment that compelled her father to enlist in the U.S. Army. But as her city celebrates the end of war, an even more urgent threat arrives: the Spanish flu. When food runs out in the cramped tenement she calls home, Pia must venture alone into the quarantined city in search of supplies, leaving her baby brothers behind. Bernice Groves has become lost in grief and bitterness since her baby died from the Spanish flu. Watching Pia leave her brothers alone, Bernice makes a shocking, life-altering decision. It becomes her sinister mission to tear families apart when they're at their most vulnerable, planning to transform the city's orphans and immigrant children into what she feels are true Americans. Waking in a makeshift hospital days after collapsing in the street, Pia is frantic to return home. Instead, she's taken to St. Vincent's Orphan Asylum. As Bernice plots to keep the truth hidden at any cost in the months and years that follow, Pia must confront her own shame and fear, risking everything to see justice and love triumph. The book, The Orphan Collector by Ellen Marie Weisman. That's if you haven't gotten enough of talking about pandemics. That's for you.
The next book I'm going to talk about is another memoir called Why Did I Get a B? And Other Mysteries We're Discussing in the Faculty Lounge by Shannon Reed. This book is part memoir, part call to action. Shannon Reed currently makes her living as a professor of creative writing at the University of Pittsburgh. But over the years, she's taught preschool, middle, and high school, and she's seen the best and worst of the American school system. This collection of wonderful essays highlights some of her favorite moments and some of the darkest days she's seen as an educator. Reed is unsparing in her expressions of frustration towards out-of-touch administrations and the criminal lack of funding in the public school system that prevents the students that need it the most from getting the education they deserve. Her writing is smart, heartfelt, and downright hilarious. Her essay on a day in the life of a preschool teacher left me gasping with laughter. But through it all, the reader is keenly aware of how much work we need to do as a country to give our schools and our teachers the support they badly need. This is a great book for any teacher in your life and an important one for anyone who wants a window into the world of education. Oh, sorry, we should have skipped ahead. There we go.
Sorry about that.
No, it's my fault.
Our next book, I'll read an excerpt. It was my high school biology teacher who urged me towards science. I was 15, the same age that Nana was when we discovered he had a habit. My mother had been cleaning Nana's room when she noticed. She'd gotten a ladder from the garage so she could sweep out his light fixture, and when she put her hand in the glass bowl of the light, she found a few scattered pills, OxyContin. Gathered there, they looked like dead bugs once drawn to the light. Years later, after all the funeral attendants had finally gone, leaving jollof and wakiai and peanut butter soup in their wake, my mother would tell me that she blamed herself for not doing more the day she cleaned the light. I should have said something kind in return. I should have comforted her, told her it wasn't her fault, but somewhere just below the surface of me, I blamed her. I blamed myself too. Guilt and doubt and fear had already settled into my young body like ghosts haunting a house. I trembled, and in the 1 second it took for the tremble to move through my body, I stopped believing in God. It happened that quickly, a tremble-length reckoning. 1 minute there was a God with the whole world in his hands. The next minute the world was plummeting ceaselessly toward an ever-shifting bottom. And that book, as you can see, is The Transcendent Kingdom by Yaa Gyasi.
The last memoir on my list is called Rising Out of Hatred, The Awakening of a Former White Nationalist by, the author is Eli Saslow. And you can go to the next slide if you want, Yvette. This is a really remarkable book. It tells the story of Derek Black, who you can see, he's the red-haired guy sitting next to this, his father there in that photo. He's the son of Don Black, who unfortunately some of you may know is the creator of Stormfront, which is one of the internet's first and most popular white supremacy hate sites. Some of Derek's more impressive, and that's in air quotes, contributions to his father's cause include building a Stormfront site for kids, which is still online, and hosting a wildly popular daily radio show with his dad. But Derek's life changed when he left his insular life to attend school at New College in Florida. Though he attempted to keep a low profile, his identity was eventually revealed. In the chaos that followed that reveal, amid the screaming for his head, or at the very least his expulsion, a few quieter voices spoke up and suggested an alternative to see, I said I was going to practice this word. Ostracization or outright physical assault. There's a great deal more to this story, but at the end of the day, that's how Derek Black began to change. This incredibly brave and brilliant young man stepped away from a lifetime of ignorance and hate because people talked to him and he listened. Because people who had no obligation to took the time to reach out to him in the spirit of forgiveness and understanding and turned their own justifiable rage at his actions and extensive history as a white supremacy leader into positive action, Derek became a different person. The story of his journey out of a life spent promoting hatred and division between races and rallying people to the cause of preventing the white genocide isn't the easiest one to read, but I couldn't put it down, and I really, really, really want everyone to read it too. And I don't know if you can see in this second picture here, but this is Derek at the inauguration of the Obama Foundation in 2017. So he's come an extremely long way since his earlier days.
It's a fascinating story. I have to read it. I have to read it.
Fantastic. I really, I sell this memoir to everybody.
The next book is on the list, and you probably have heard of it, but it is was chosen as the Long Island Reads book for this year, The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. So you're going to see a lot about that book this year. And the story is basically about twins, two mixed race identical twins who are separated by their embrace of different racial identities. They reevaluate their choices as one raises a Black daughter in their Southern hometown, while the other passes for white with a husband who is unaware of her heritage. So that's a book that a lot of people on Long Island will be reading this year. So I encourage everyone to read it.
I'm sorry, I lied. I do actually sort of have another memoir. So this is a book called Solutions and Other Problems by the very adorable Ali Brosh, who you can see here. This is actually a graphic memoir, so it's in a graphic novel style that tackles some amazingly difficult subjects with humor and total grace. Ali Brosh is a cartoonist and a writer who first garnered national attention with her hit blog Hyperbole and a Half back in 2009. She told incredibly relatable stories about her struggles with her mental health and dazzled her readers with hilarious stories from her childhood, like my personal favorite, The Year Kenny Loggins Ruined Christmas. It's a great title. Her first book, also titled Hyperbole and a Half, was a New York Times bestseller, and it catapulted her into the spotlight, which didn't exactly sit well with the self-described recluse who also suffers from anxiety and debilitating depression. So she dropped off the planet for several years before abruptly announcing the publication of her new book, Solutions and Other Problems, which was earlier this past year. Okay, so you can go to the next slide. Don't be fooled by Brosh's 7-year-old on a sugar high getting goofy with the markers style of drawing. As much as I snort laughed my way through this book, I was also struck by the depth of feeling and wisdom that Brosh conveys with her stories. The simplicity belies a great deal of depth and feeling. There's plenty of fantastically weird childhood memories, and especially insane and uncomfortable odyssey with the family pets, horrifyingly called the Poop Mystery. But they're interspersed with bald face, hard staring right into the truly terrible tragedy she's been dealing with for the last 3 years. While I'd very much recommend reading her first book, it's not necessary to have read it to enjoy this one. There's a great deal of joy to be found here, but there's hard stuff too. It's not an easy read, and I probably spent just as much time getting misty-eyed as I did laughing, but it's well worth it for anyone who just wants to feel like they're not alone with their own feelings of insecurity or sadness, especially this, around now. Her struggles and her journey to self-acceptance will feel familiar to just about anybody who reads this.
Next book I'm really looking forward to reading. Paris, 1939. Young and ambitious, Odile Souchet has it all. Her handsome police officer beau and a dream job at the American Library in Paris. When the Nazis march into Paris, Odile stands to lose everything she holds dear, including her beloved library. Together with her fellow librarians, Odile joins the resistance with the best weapons she has, books. But when the war finally ends, instead of freedom, Odile tastes the bitter sting of unspeakable betrayal. Flash forward to Montana, 1983. Lily is a lonely teenager looking for adventure in a small town in Montana. Her interest is piqued by her solitary elderly neighbor. As Lily uncovers more about her neighbor's mysterious past, she finds that they share a love of language, the same longings and the same intense jealousy, never suspecting that a dark secret from the past connects them. And that book is The Paris Library by Janet Skesley Charles. And the book is, it's a fiction book, historical fiction, but it's actually based on the true World War II story of the heroic librarians at the American Library in Paris. That book, however, is not out until February, so stay tuned for that one.
You can put it on hold now if you want.
Ah, that's true.
So this next book is, I was like iffy about putting it on, but I think it's really suitable for us, even though it is technically for middle and juvenile readers. This is The Silver Arrow by Lev Grossman. And if you're curious, if you visit our YouTube page, I actually interviewed Mr. Grossman this past summer, in part about The Silver Arrow. So we discuss it in more detail there. This is a fantastical adventure of the old school that is perfect read aloud material to enjoy with your family. That's how I read it to my 2 sons. The author Lev Grossman's perhaps best known for his adult series, The Magicians, which was also turned into a television series that ran on the Sci-Fi Channel for several years. This is his first foray into writing for the younger set. Think Narnia, but also The Never-Ending Story and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, perhaps without the intense overt hatred for children, and Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass and The Wonderful Wizard of Oz without the overt insanity, where precocious children are dropped into extraordinary circumstances, make friends with astonishing creatures, and have adventures that guide them somewhat roughly towards adulthood. Then throw in witty, never pandering writing, rich and delicious descriptions, and ancient melancholy magical moments, and you'll get a bit closer to this magnificent book. Kate is more or less your typical preteen. She's quick-witted and clever and kind of done with her boring little suburban life. It's her birthday, and more or less just because she has nothing better to do, she decides she'll ask for a present from her mother's estranged and strange rich Uncle Herbert. More than a little wackiness ensues when Uncle Herbert delivers. What he delivers turns out to be a train. A real-life, fully operational steam train that Kate and her family are astonished to find sitting in front of their house along with Uncle Herbert. Wackiness trades up for outright crazy town when mysteriously appearing train tracks whisk Kate and her little brother Tom away on an honest-to-goodness real magical adventure. What's the deal with the train? Why in the heck does Uncle Herbert have it? Who are the passengers? Where's it going? All very good questions with equally marvelous answers that I wouldn't dream of spoiling for you.
I probably should have screen.
And these are some of the equally wonderful illustrations that have
those illustrations are great. The train on the right, that's cool.
It's amazing. I'd actually love to see this turned into like an animated film. It's a really wonderful story with a great message. It well worth reading. Perfect for reading to kids and grandkids.
Cool. The next book is a mystery thriller. One victim, four accused. Who is telling the truth? When Jody, a 16-year-old girl with facial deformities, accuses four boys in her class of an unthinkable crime, the community is torn apart. After all, these four teenage defendants are from hardworking immigrant families, and they all have proven alibis. Even Jody's best friend doesn't believe her. But Zara Khalil, one of London's brightest legal minds, does, and she is determined to fight for Jody, to find the truth in the face of public outcry. And as issues of sex, race, and social justice collide, the most explosive criminal trial of the year builds to a shocking conclusion. That book is Take It Back by Kia Abdullah.
So my next book is a fantasy novel by Susanna Clarke called Piranesi. And I would call this utterly unputdownable. Susanna Clarke left me totally breathless with this gorgeous tale of modern day magic that echoes with the deeper, darker, older world of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which was her first epic novel that was written in 2004. Piranesi, named, I'm guessing, for the Italian architect of fantastical prisons, lives in the house. So if we go to the next slide. This is one of Piranesi's amazing illustrations. The house provides food, shelter, and comfort in the form of endless rooms of beautiful and bizarre statues. Piranesi loves the house with a zealotry that borders on fanatical, and if he remembers a life before he lived there, it's only the barest hint of a memory, gone before it fully forms. There's only one other living person in this strange, silent world. He knows him as the Other. The Other is a wise seeker of truth who longs to learn the secret power he knows is hidden in the house, and he needs Piranesi's help to find it. Piranesi trusts him implicitly, taking the Other's warnings about avoiding strangers at all costs and believing utterly in the value of the Other's quest for knowledge. But if the house is the only world there is, what is Piranesi to make of the scattered journal pages he finds in his own handwriting, telling of a world totally unlike the house? If strangers are dangerous and violent, why does he feel such a longing to connect with the one who finds their way into the halls of the house? Where does the Other go when he's not in the house? Told in Piranesi's sweet, innocent voice through the journals that he uses to chronicle his life, the reader swiftly becomes comfortably lost in the halls of the house. It's effortless to simply relax into the dreamy, endless white halls with their beautiful, finely carved statues. The simplicity of Piranesi's life there is totally intoxicating. When that simplicity is ultimately disrupted, it's nothing short of traumatic. Clarke has woven a truly wonderful story here that left me heartbroken. Piranesi's journey to the truth about who he is and what has happened to him isn't just tragic because of some horrible crime done to him, but because shattering his illusions about the house is like breaking the vestiges of a belief in God. I urge you to walk the halls of the house for yourself and lose yourself in the peace of Piranesi's world. This is the kind of story that reminds you why reading is so wonderful.
The next book is also a mystery thriller. You might know a husband like Claire's, ambitious, admired, with deep pockets. But behind closed doors, he has a temper that burns as bright as his promising political career, and he's not above using his staff to track Claire's every move. What he doesn't know is that Claire has worked for months on a plan to vanish. A chance meeting in an airport brings her together with a woman who seems equally desperate to flee her life. Together, they make a last-minute decision to switch tickets. Claire taking Eva's flight to Oakland and Eva traveling to Puerto Rico as Claire. But when the Puerto Rico plane crashes, Claire's options narrow to one impossible choice: assume Eva's identity, and along with it, the secrets Eva fought so hard to keep hidden. That book is called The Last Flight by Julie Clarke.
This next book is also a thriller, slightly different. It's called The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher. And this is one of those books that's a little bit hard to assign to just one genre. It's part quirky buddy comedy, part urban fantasy, and part cosmic horror. I know that's a lot of parts. It'll have you laughing at its clever dialogue one moment and gasping in horror at its terrifying. Fisher lulls the reader into a slightly false sense of security at first as she slowly unfolds the story of Kara, a recent divorcee who's trying to put her life back together by helping her eccentric Uncle Earl run his museum of curiosities. When Uncle Earl has to go into the hospital for several weeks for knee surgery, he leaves Kara in charge. And in the midst of cataloging Uncle Earl's crazy inventory of giant prehistoric otters and shrunken heads, she discovers, amazingly, a door into another world. But what she discovers is no Narnia. Instead, she finds herself in a vast, and if we go to the next slide, desolate world filled with mysterious bunkers and an endless sea of tiny islands covered in willow trees and equally mysterious creatures, both visible and invisible. And then she discovers the first message. Pray, they are hungry. For all the laughs provided by Kingfisher's witty dialogue, there are more than a few gross out moments in this, so I would definitely say this is more for fans of authors like H.P. Lovecraft by way of Douglas Adams. But if you like quirky adventures with the odd jump scare, this will definitely be a great fit for you. Kingfisher makes the utterly unreal seem totally plausible, and she definitely had me checking my closet more than once after I finished this one.
The next book, also a mystery thriller. Amanda and Clay head out to a remote corner of Long Island expecting a vacation. Quiet reprieve from life in New York City, quality time with their teenage son and daughter, and a taste of the good life in the luxurious home they've rented for the week. But a late night knock on the door breaks the spell. Ruth and GH are an older couple. It's their house, and they've arrived in a panic. They bring the news that a sudden blackout has swept the city. But in this rural area, with the TV and internet now down and no cell phone service, it's hard to know what to believe. Should Amanda and Clay trust this couple and vice versa? What happened back in New York? Is the vacation home, isolated from civilization, a truly safe place for their families? Are they safe from one another? That book is Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam.
I'm turning to some contemporary romance now. And this is a really, really fun one. This is The Roommate by Rosie Danan. It's a totally charming contemporary romance in which Clara and Josh have what might be the most original meet cute in history when California hottie Josh takes over the room of a house Clara had just moved into when her actual roommate and longtime crush suddenly absconds on a tour with his band. Just to make things extra interesting, Josh turns out to be Josh Darling, one of the most popular porn stars in the country. High-strung socialite Clara is all set to book a return flight to the familiar streets of New York, but fortunately Josh talks her off the ledge, and soon they're testing the waters of a tentative friendship. Soon Clara's got a new job and a new appreciation for Josh's work and world, and the two set out on a new business venture to help Josh get out from under the corrupt and oppressive production company that has an iron fist around the industry and treats everyone who works for them like dirt. For his part, Josh is totally dazzled by Clara's smarts and kindness and genuinely good heart, things he doesn't encounter too often in his line of work. But can a relationship between two such complete opposites really work? Obviously, I'm not going to ruin this for you by telling you, but I can tell you that this is a wonderful, lighthearted romantic comedy that offers just the kind of Hollywood ending you'd want. Danan's writing is fun and frothy, and her characters have fantastic chemistry. If you've enjoyed books like The Hating Game by Sally Thorne or anything by Christina Lauren, this one will be one you will not be able to help falling in love with.
I should have advanced.
Keep calm and love your roommate.
Cute. Another mystery. This one sounds not as frightening though. In a peaceful retirement village, 4 unlikely friends meet weekly in the Jigsaw room to discuss unsolved crimes. Together they call themselves the Thursday Murder Club. And though they might be pushing 80, they still have a few tricks up their sleeves. When a local developer is found dead with a mysterious photograph left next to the body, the Thursday Murder Club suddenly find themselves in the middle of their first live case. As the bodies begin to pile up, can our unorthodox but brilliant gang catch the killer before it's too late? That book is The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman.
So I've got another romance for you here. This is especially good fit for any fan of Renaissance fairs, which is actually why I read it, because I'm a huge Renaissance fair geek. It's called Well Met by Jen DeLuca. Love rules the day at the Willow Creek Renaissance Fair. While the setting, one of my all-time favorite places in the world, was enough to pique my interest, it was Jen DeLuca's delightful light style and gentle, sweet story that won my heart. Emily is a recent transplant to Willow Creek, Maryland, where she's moved temporarily to help take care of her sister, who's recovering from a serious car accident, and her niece, who's dealing with being a 14-year-old. When her niece decides she just has to be a part of the yearly Ren Fair, Emily has to go along. Surprisingly, she finds herself having a blast learning the ropes of being a tavern wench and making friends with the locals. If only she didn't have to deal with Simon, the organizer, micromanager of the fair, who's bound and determined to be as insufferable as possible and prevent Emily from making any changes to the way he does things. But once fair gets underway and Simon puts on his own costume, that of a leather-clad pirate, he's no longer the rude, standoffish killjoy. Now he's a gorgeous, mysterious sex god who Emily's tavern wench does not mind getting up close and personal with at all. I loved this book. Ms. DeLuca is clearly a great fan of Ren fairs, as evidenced by the amount of detail that goes into Willow Creeks. I would happily visit this fair in a heartbeat. I loved her charming cast of adorable nerds who take the whole thing super seriously, and who I greatly look forward to reading about in books of their own, which are forthcoming. I loved the gentle honesty of Emily and Simon's story and the sweet, sometimes silly path they took to get to their happily ever after. Oh, and the next slide is actually, this book has inspired some like legitimate fan art. People are so thrilled by it. So see, these are some of the art pieces that various fans have done of these two characters.
Images are great.
I know, they're fantastic.
Another mystery. December 1926, England unleashes the largest manhunt in history. The object of the search is not an escaped convict or war criminal, but the missing wife of a World War II hero, up-and-coming author Agatha Christie. When the car is found, wrecked, empty, and abandoned near a natural spring, the country is in a frenzy. 11 days later, Agatha reappears claiming amnesia. She provides no answers for her disappearance. That is, until she writes a very strange book about a missing woman, a murderous husband, and a plan to expose the truth. What role did her unfaithful husband play, and what was he not telling the investigators? The book, The Mystery of Mrs. Christie by Marie Benedict. Also very interested in reading that one. That one looks kind of neat.
Yeah, there's a lot of buzz around this one. It is a true story. She, to this day, nobody knows what happened to her.
These are actually, this is a real, from a newspaper. There were tons of newspaper clippings, so. Oops, went too fast. Sorry.
So this is actually 3 books, but I swear I'm going to talk fast. I read all 3 of them, and they're all equally fantastic. This is the Brown Sisters series by Talia Hibbert. She's actually a British author who's starting to get a lot of positive press this side of the pond, who's been writing for a very long time, but this is the series that's kind of landed here for her, very justifiably. So this is a series of 3 books. Each one is better than the last, which, if you know anything about series, is like extraordinarily rare. I was really surprised by how much, and the first book is fantastic, but by the 3rd one, I was just like completely in love with this author. So the books follow the romantic adventures of the Brown sisters. Chloe, in the first book, Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and then in the next slide, her sisters, Danny and Eve. Each book focuses on a different sister and her misadventures in finding Mr. Right. All 3 stories are charming contemporary romances with smart writing and lovable but realistic and relatable characters. Each sister's dealing with issues that most readers would find incredibly familiar. Chloe's confronting a medical diagnosis that has completely upended her entire life. Danny's trying to balance her efforts to be taken seriously as a woman of color in academia with having a fulfilling personal life. And Eve just can't figure anything out about her life. What makes this series stand out for me, though, is that despite each story standing on its own, the thread of familial love that runs through them is incredibly strong. As much as these are romances, they're also stories of strong women bonded together by love for each other. It's also incredibly refreshing to read stories where the protagonists are dealing with a variety of issues, like mental health or discrimination, but the books never become entirely about those issues. obviously doesn't hurt that Talia Hibbert has a wonderful sense of humor, and she's not too shabby at writing a steamy romantic moment either. But it's wonderful to be reminded that romance novels can also be very smart and send a really positive, important social message at the same time. These aren't books where the heroines' lives are immediately fixed just by meeting the right man. Hibbert really explores how meeting the right person can help you grow in your own right and become more than you were on your own. I really just love that sentiment. I highly recommend each and every book in this series, and I'm eagerly awaiting anything she chooses to write for the future. It's absolutely not necessary to read these in any particular order. All the sisters sort of make little cameo appearances in each other's books. They're wonderful, light, but smart reading that will totally delight and leave you with something to think about, which is a pretty perfect combination. I think of them as smart beach reads.
Next book is a sci-fi book, science fiction. Somewhere out beyond the edge of the universe, there is a library that contains an infinite number of books, each one the story of another reality. One tells the story of your life as it is, along with another book for the other life you could have lived if you had made a different choice at any point in your life. While we all wonder how our lives might have been, what if you had the chance to go to the library and see for yourself? Would any of these other lives truly be better? And that book is One Library, Infinite Lives. That sounds kind of interesting too.
I can't decide if that sounds great or horrifying.
I know, right? You're right.
This is another one that's sort of hard to classify. I threw it in thriller mystery, but it kind of, I'll explain. So this is called Mexican Gothic, and it's by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This was out this past summer and was very popular. This is a gorgeous, very gripping read that threw me the most astounding curveball about 70% of the way through, and I really almost chucked the book across the room because I just couldn't believe what had happened. But I pulled it together and I stuck with it, and it delivered like just a grand slam ending. It made me immediately think that a director like Guillermo del Toro should adapt it into a movie. It's just exactly that kind of story. So as I said, this isn't for, this is another one that isn't for the easily freaked out. Garcia's weaved a very atmospheric thriller here. It's like a mashup of Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca and like a campy horror film like The Blob, which I know sounds kind of insane, but just like stick with me for a second. If you go to the next slide, this is another piece of fan art. I asked that you note the mushrooms, which are relevant. I won't tell you why. This was done by Kelly McMorris, who's on Twitter and was so in love with this book that she created this gorgeous piece. So this is Naomi Teoboda, and after receiving a frantic letter from her newlywed cousin begging for someone to save her from a mysterious doom, fun-loving debutante Naomi leaves her lavish, glamorous life in Mexico City and heads to High Place, a distant estate in the Mexican countryside. She's not sure what she'll find. Her cousin's husband, a handsome Englishman, is a stranger, and Naomi knows little about where she's going. She's immediately confronted by the husband's strange and off-putting family, who definitely seem to be hiding something and are reluctant to let her talk to her cousin or let her explore the house and its mysterious, isolated surroundings. Naomi starts to have strange waking dreams and slowly becomes convinced that something truly sinister is happening at High Place. But neither she nor the reader can possibly imagine what's really going on. I promise, if you think you know what's going on, you don't. I found myself very drawn in by Garcia's writing, which is wonderfully evocative. The juxtaposition of Naomi's glam life in 1950s Mexico City and the dark, dismal world of High Place is really powerful. I was pulled into isolation and the festering malignance surrounding this mysterious place she finds herself in. Hers is the kind of writing that you can really feel like down in your bones. This book is not going to be for everyone, which I feel like I've said a few too many times in this for like a book talk. Take the title seriously. It's very much a traditional Gothic novel where strange and supernatural things will absolutely occur. The author really pulls from old Mexican mythology to deliver some truly original scares. But if you stick with it, it really does deliver a dark and delightfully sinister denouement and a very satisfying ending. Fans of more traditional period mysteries may be thrown by the otherworldly plot elements, but if you can suspend disbelief and just let yourself get swept up into the story, it is one heck of a ride.
So this book is a nonfiction book, and for those who don't want a story that's going to take them away. So it's the book War, How Conflict Shaped Us by Margaret Macmillan. War is always with us, even in peace. Our very language, our public spaces, our private memories, some of our greatest cultural treasures reflect the glory and the misery of war. Margaret Macmillan looks at the ways in which war has shaped human history and how in turn changes the political organization, technology, or ideologies, and how it affects how and why we fight. Macmillan reveals the many faces of war, the way it shapes our past, our future, our views of the world, and our very conception of ourselves. It's an interesting concept because she sort of looks at all sides of war.
So this one, again, is like another hard to classify, but I'm just sort of calling it straight up fiction. This book is called Quality Land, and it's written by Mark Huey Kling. So I'd like to welcome you to Quality Land, the best country on earth. Here, a universal ranking system determines the social advantages and career opportunities of every member of society. An automated matchmaking service knows the best partners for everyone and helps with the breakup when your ideal match frequently changes. And the foolproof algorithms of the biggest, most successful company in the world, the shop, which is definitely not Amazon, know what you want before you do and conveniently deliver it to your doorstep before you even order it. So what happens when you don't want what the shop has sent you? Peter Jobless, a machine scrapper, so he does have a job, his name's a little confusing, may just be the first person to receive an item he most certainly did not want. I'm not going to ruin the truly hilarious joke by telling you what that item is. But he is determined to return it even if he ends up dying in the attempt, which he just might. Accompanied by a hapless band of useless robots he couldn't bring himself to scrap, a mysterious young woman with her own war to fight against the leaders of Quality Land, and with the guidance of a Yoda-esque sage who may or may not actually know what he's talking about, Peter Jobless careens ever closer to a confrontation with the creator of the shop and his own destiny. One of the people who reviewed this book called it like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy meets 1984, and I honestly can't think of a better description. The author manages to make things just crazy enough to not feel too real, but the comparisons to our own consumerism and media-driven addicted society are they're almost too on point. But you'll be laughing, but you'll be terrified of the implications while you're laughing. Anyone who's a fan of writers like Douglas Adams, Neil Gaiman, or Terry Pratchett will get a huge kick out of this. It didn't surprise me at all to learn that it's been optioned by Mike Judge, who is the director behind Idiocracy and Office Space, for a series at HBO. It's also apparently the first in a series, the second of which is about to be released in Kling's native Germany, which this was actually published in German before it came here, and hopefully shortly here as well. A surrealistic comedy, I would call it. And here we have some drones dropping packages by the shop, which again, definitely not Amazon.
Not Amazon. Okay, I think we have a few memoirs. I have a few memoirs to kind of end with. So I'll Be Seeing You is a memoir by Elizabeth Berg. A lot of you may be familiar with her work. And she describes her parents' marriage as a romance that lasted for nearly 70 years, but then her father developed Alzheimer's disease, and her parents were forced to leave the home that they loved and move into a facility that could offer them help. It was time for the couple's children to, in effect, parent the people who had for so long parented them. I'll Be Seeing You is an honest exploration of the emotions that arise when caring for aging parents. The next memoir is The Smallest Lights in the Universe by Sarah Seeger. Sarah Seeger has always been in love with the stars. Now a pioneering planetary scientist, she searches for exoplanets. But with the unexpected death of Seeger's husband, the purpose of her own life becomes hard for her to see. Suddenly at 40, she is a widow and the single mother of 2 young boys. For the first time, she feels alone in the universe. As she struggles to navigate her life after loss, Seeger takes solace in the alien beauty of exoplanets and discovers earthbound connections that feel every bit as wondrous when strangers and loved ones alike reach out to her across the space of her grief. Most unexpected of all, there is another kind of a 1 in a billion match, not in the stars, but here at home. That's The Smallest Lights in the Universe memoir. This memoir I'm going to read an excerpt from. I actually would like to read this one too. It's on my list to read. It's called When Time Stopped by Ariana Newman. There is a question mark almost lost in a sea of names on the walls of an old synagogue in Prague. Visitors hush children as they pass through each chamber of the Pincus Memorial. It is hard not to be overwhelmed by the dizzying display of black and red letters. They memorialize 77,297 individuals. Each was a resident of the Czech districts of Bohemia and Moravia during the war. All were victims of the Nazis. Next to every name is stenciled the date of birth, and next to each date of birth neatly sits the date of death. One entry bears the name of my father, Anis Stanislav Newman, born on February 9, 1921. It is different. Unlike the others on that wall, it has no date of death. Instead, carefully calligraphed, there is an incongruous and bold black question mark. I visited the memorial in 1997 as a tourist, unaware of any link with the synagogue. Scanning across the top wall to my right as I descended the steps into the first chamber, I was astounded to see my father's name. He was then very much alive, settled and working in Caracas, and yet the bold question mark was there, both jarring and oddly apposite. This was the first time I had seen the query linked on the wall, but questions about my father had emerged long before. My quest for answers started when I was just a little girl living across an ocean and a sea in a very different world. That's When Time Stopped, Ariana Newman.
Oh, so we've reached the end of our books. We just have a couple of shameless plugs to share with you as well. We wanted to let everybody know that the adult winter reading program will be starting soon. Signups are going to begin on January 9th, and we have a Roaring 20s theme this year. We've very cleverly called it the Reading 20s. And as again, you can start signing up on January 9th, and you can visit our website for some more information. And if you are looking for any more advice on what to read, we can also offer you what we call our personal book finders. Any of the reference librarians in adult services are always ready to offer advice on what you should read next. If you'd like to contact us online, if you go to our website and you go to the adult drop-down menu, you'll see the link to the personal book finder, which is right, just explains what that is here. Basically, we ask you a few questions about what you like to read, what the last great book you read was, what books you really don't like to read, and we will then put together a curated list, usually between 12 and like 15 books that we recommend to you, and direct links to put them on hold or check them out at the library.
So that is it. You have tasted a lot and are probably overstuffed, especially after you already had dinner.
It was very helpful.
We
really.
hope
I was taking notes, like, yeah, it was great.
We found something that you'd like to read
Too.
Yeah.
Wow. Quite a few. And I recommend, even though it's my friend Sue that I'm telling her, she probably knows already, but I recommend Transcendent Kingdom. And I recommend Vanishing Half. I read both and I enjoyed both immensely. Yeah.
Oh, good.
So
I was thinking Transcendent Kingdom might be a little hard.
it was very hard, but I fell in love with her when she wrote Homegoing.
Yeah, that was excellent.
And that was just a phenomenal book. So it was hard. And some of the other ones I had on my list, but some of them I've never heard of that I'm definitely going to look into.
Oh, fantastic. That's what we want. We want to help you out
here.
And
The Brown Sisters series sounds really interesting.
Oh, they're so great.
Well, I have 7 books sitting on my chair now. I'm going to wait a little while.
Well, as I said, they're great.
all of
Like
us do
reading.
that.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much. I'm so glad. Thanks, Sue, for
Just
linking
so
me
you
up.
all know, I do have, because the first 3 people that signed on were
Mhm.
actually the ones that I was going to select. That was literally, I told Sarah how I was going to do it. That would get the reading bag.
Oh,
Since we had 3 of you, it makes it so easy.
really?
So just, yeah, really, I've got some things packed.
Oh.
And just, I will probably email you to find out if you want it to come and pick it up, or I could box it and mail it if you don't want to go out. So
Thank
look
you.
for an email. I think, I mean, obviously I emailed all of you with the
Yeah.
links, so I will be
Thank
able
you.
to. Susie, let me just make sure. Okay, I see it. Okay, I just want to make sure. So I'll email all of you and then we can just sort of figure out how I can get the gifts to you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so
Thank
much.
you so much for coming. I
Bye,
hope you have a
guys.
really nice night.
Good luck with everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yvette, I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Yep, see you tomorrow. Have a nice night.